Welcome to the Business English Podcast. I'm Rob, and today we're diving into some of the most critical communication skills that will help you excel in any fast-paced work environment. But before we unpack those tactics, let me tell you a quick story about Charlie, a non-native English speaker working in London who's been struggling with his never-ending to-do list. Charlie's mornings start with a flurry of emails asking him to jump on new projects, attend back-to-back meetings, and finalise urgent reports. All by the end of the day, of course. Sound familiar? He wants to push back on impossible deadlines, but he's nervous about offending his manager. He's ready to delegate tasks, but he's unsure how to phrase it politely in English. He also feels he's drowning in requests, yet doesn't know how to refuse extra work without appearing unhelpful. That's where today's episode comes in. We're going to tackle the exact communication hacks Charlie and anyone facing a similar situation needs to manage time and workload effectively. We'll explore how to confidently delegate tasks, push back on unrealistic deadlines, clarify expectations, and politely refuse extra tasks. By the end of our chat today, you'll have a toolkit of powerful phrases and strategies to use at your job, no matter what curveballs get thrown your way. And here's the catch. We won't just look at what to say, but also how to say it, so you can sound professional and polished every time. Trust me, once you master these skills, you'll never look at a crowded inbox the same way again. If you've ever felt overwhelmed like Charlie, balancing multiple projects, trying to impress your boss, and keeping yourself from burnout, then you're in exactly the right place. In a moment, we'll dive into the reasons these skills are so vital, and I'll share the specific sentences and structures that will transform your communication style. But let me warn you, after hearing these tactics, you might wish you'd learned them sooner. Ready to level up your business English and productivity? Stay tuned, because this episode will give you the edge you need in today's demanding professional world. Let's get started. Right, we're about to dive into why these communication skills around time management and productivity, delegating tasks, pushing back on deadlines, clarifying expectations, and politely refusing extra workload are absolute game changers. You might be thinking, sure, I know these are important, but how do they actually make a difference day to day? Well, let me pull the curtain back for you. First off, mastering these skills prevents miscommunication. Just imagine, you're assigned a project with a looming deadline, and you're juggling 3 other tasks at the same time. If you don't speak up and clarify what you can realistically deliver, you risk not just failing to meet expectations, but also damaging trust with your manager and teammates. When you say, "Yes, I can handle this by Friday," but really you're not sure, that's a recipe for stress, late nights, and possibly subpar results. The power of politely pushing back can save you those frantic, last-minute scrambles. Secondly, these skills help you build trust and respect. Think about it. If you delegate tasks effectively, you're showing your team that you value their capabilities and expertise. And if you can calmly negotiate a timeline, it signals that you're committed to delivering quality work rather than simply just saying yes to everything and risking burnout. People want to work with colleagues who communicate openly and responsibly, who know how to handle constraints without melting down or ghosting on a project. The third benefit might just be the most overlooked. It protects your well-being. We've all had moments where we felt like the office Atlas, carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. But here's the catch. Doing everything yourself isn't a testament to your productivity. It's a fast track to burnout. If you can master the art of refusing extra tasks politely but firmly, you'll be in a much healthier space to tackle your existing workload. In other words, you won't just survive your career, you'll thrive in it. And let's talk about productivity and efficiency. Communicating your bandwidth clearly and setting boundaries allows everyone involved to adapt, realign, and optimize resources. Who doesn't want a smoother workflow where tasks are assigned to the right people and deadlines actually make sense? When you keep everyone in the loop on what you can do and what you can't do, you eliminate confusion and minimize the need for constant follow-ups or emergency fixes. Let me offer a couple of quick scenarios, the kinds of situations you might face daily. Scenario 1. You're deep into one project when your boss suddenly wants you to tackle something urgent. If you don't clarify the new project scope or ask for an adjusted deadline, you risk delivering rushed work on both tasks. But with the right language, you can propose a feasible timeline or even suggest delegating parts of the project to a colleague. Scenario 2. You're collaborating with a client who has big expectations and a small time frame. You can't meet the deadline without cutting corners, so you politely push back. By explaining that you want to maintain quality standards and need an extra 2 days, you position yourself as a professional focused on excellence rather than a yes person who just can't deliver. Now, you might be wondering how to phrase all of this without sounding rude or lazy. We'll get into those exact phrases soon, but before we do, think about what your work life would look like if you had these skills down to a T. You'd have less stress, better relationships with your team, and a more organized workload. Sounds good, right? Stick around because in just a moment, we'll explore the language structures and key expressions you need to pull it off confidently. Ready to turn this knowledge into a real competitive edge? Great, because up next, we'll talk about how to form these crucial elements of speech and deliver them in a way that feels both natural and professional. You won't want to miss it, especially if you've ever had the tight-chested feeling when your boss or colleague hands you yet another urgent task. Stay tuned. Okay, it's time to tackle the practical part of today's episode. How exactly to form key phrases for delegating tasks, pushing back on deadlines, clarifying expectations, and politely refusing extra work. Before we dive into the specific phrases, however, I want to quickly let you know if you're hungry for even more powerful professional resources and want to grab a transcript of an episode, sign up for our weekly newsletter, the 3-Minute Minutes. You'll get bite-sized tips that make a huge impact on your business communication skills. The link is in the show notes. All right, let's get straight into the good stuff. I'll introduce each phrase, then we'll repeat it together so you can practice the pronunciation and rhythm. And then I'll wrap up with a quick scenario and a nuance to pay attention to. Ready? Let's begin. Delegating tasks. Phrase 1. Could you take the lead on this project? Could you take the lead on this project? You've just been assigned a high priority project, but you already have too much on your plate. You want someone on your team who's highly capable to run with it. Notice how could you is polite yet direct. It's more inviting than simply saying, take the lead on this project. The modal verb could keeps the tone collaborative. Phrase 2. I'd appreciate your support in finalizing the report by Thursday. I'd appreciate your support in finalizing the report by Thursday. The scenario here could be that the boss needs a polished report in 2 days, and you're swamped. You're asking a colleague to tie up the loose ends. Now, the nuance here is that the phrase I'd appreciate your support frames the task as a request for partnership rather than an order. It makes the listener feel valued. Phrase 3. Would you be able to handle the initial research for this task? Would you be able to handle the initial research for this task? A potential scenario could be when a client wants a market analysis done and you need someone to gather data before you can move forward. Now, would you be able to softens the request but still conveys that this is important work you need help with? It also checks the person's availability and willingness. Pushing back on deadlines. Phrase 1. Given the current workload, could we look at extending the deadline by a few days? Given the current workload, could we look at extending the deadline by a few days? This is great to use when your manager drops a new project on you and expects it done ASAP. You're already juggling 3 other major tasks. Given the current workload is a polite way to say you're already fully booked, and could we look at suggests a cooperative approach instead of a blunt I can't. Phrase 2. I'd like to discuss a more feasible timeline to ensure quality results. I'd like to discuss a more feasible timeline to ensure quality results. You can use this one when you've got an important project due, but you know rushing it will jeopardize the quality. You need to open a conversation about the schedule. The phrase I'd like to discuss sets a collaborative tone. You're not outright refusing, you're inviting your boss or client to reconsider the timeline together. Phrase 3. I'm concerned about meeting this deadline without compromising on quality. Could we revisit the schedule? I'm concerned about meeting this deadline without compromising on quality. Could we revisit the schedule? This is great for when a last-minute project request pops up and you know you can't deliver top-notch work in that time frame. Revisit the schedule implies that the initial timeline might not be set in stone. You're showing you care about quality, which is a big plus in most professional environments. Clarifying expectations. Phrase 1. Could you clarify the main goals for this project? Could you clarify the main goals for this project? A scenario could be that you've been assigned a new task but only have vague details. Before you dive in, you need clarity to avoid wasted effort. Could you clarify gently asks for more detail without implying that the instructions were inadequate. It shows you want a complete understanding. Phrase 2. What are the key deliverables you'd like to see by Friday? What are the key deliverables you'd like to see by Friday? You could use this one when you're working on a weekly update, but you're not entirely sure which elements your manager or client prioritizes most. Key deliverables is project management language that indicates you're focused on the important outputs, not just random tasks. Phrase 3. How would you define success for this assignment? How would you define success for this assignment? You're on a new team project where success could mean different things to different people. This question ensures everyone's on the same page. The phrase define success helps you extract specific metrics and criteria. You'll avoid misunderstandings if you know exactly what success looks like. Politely refusing extra workload. Phrase 1. Thank you for thinking of me, but I won't be able to take this on at the moment. Thank you for thinking of me, but I won't be able to take this on at the moment. A colleague asks if you can collaborate on a side project, but you're already stretched thin. Notice how this phrase starts with appreciation. It's a gentle way to acknowledge the request before you decline. Phrase 2. I'd love to help, but my schedule is fully booked this week. I'd love to help, but my schedule is fully booked this week. You could use this one when your manager wants you to join an ad hoc task force while you're finalizing a major presentation. "I'd love to help" keeps the tone positive, but "my schedule is fully booked" conveys a legitimate reason you can't take on the additional work. Phrase 3. "I'm afraid I don't have the capacity to give this the attention it deserves right now." I'm afraid I don't have the capacity to give this the attention it deserves right now. You could use this one when you're asked to lead yet another project, but you want to ensure anything you agree to is done well. The attention it deserves shows respect for the task. You're indicating the work is important and you don't want to compromise its quality. Now you have a solid set of phrases to tackle the big four: delegating tasks, pushing back on deadlines, clarifying expectations, and politely refusing extra work. But how do you make them sound natural? And what are the common pitfalls to avoid? Stick around, because up next, we'll dive into the most common errors professionals make when using these phrases, and of course, how to steer clear of them. Right, we've just covered the must-have phrases for delegating tasks, pushing back on deadlines, clarifying expectations, and politely refusing extra work. But what about the pitfalls that can trip you up when using these phrases? Let's dive into a few common errors and how to avoid them, so you can communicate with clarity and professionalism. Using overly direct language. One big mistake is coming across too blunt or forceful. Imagine you say, "Extend the deadline, I can't finish on time." It might sound like a demand rather than a request. Instead, weaving in modal verbs like could or would it be possible softens your tone. This keeps relationships positive and ensures your concerns are heard. And don't worry, softening your language doesn't mean you're any less assertive. In fact, politely phrased requests often get faster, more constructive responses. Over-apologizing or being too vague. The second common error here is going overboard on apologies or providing fuzzy explanations. Picture this: "I'm really sorry, I'm just so swamped, sorry," and you trail off. Not only does that confuse the person listening, but you risk sounding unsure or unprofessional. A single, genuine apology, if needed, is enough. Pair it with a clear, concise reason: "I'm sorry, but I have multiple deadlines this week and can't commit the necessary time." Specificity can be your best friend, especially if you want your audience to understand why you can't comply or need extra help. Failing to provide reasons or alternative solutions. Here's a scenario. Someone asks you for help and you say, "No, I can't." End of story. That abrupt reply can feel dismissive and leave the other person wondering if you're unwilling or just not interested. A better approach? Offer context on possible alternatives. For example, "I can't help with that right now because I'm finishing a key project, but I could assist you next week or connect you with a colleague who has time to pitch in." A little more detail goes a long way in preserving goodwill and keeping lines of communication open. Not following up with next steps. The fourth issue is neglecting to confirm next steps. Maybe you delegate a task. Would you be able to handle the initial research? But then forget to clarify the deadline or the handover process. That leaves your colleague guessing, and important details might slip through the cracks. Also, include a final check-in. How about we touch base on Wednesday to see where we stand? Or, "Let's confirm the due date before we move forward." This ensures everyone walks away with the same clear plan and nobody's left in the dark. Tips for getting the best out of these skills. Now you know what not to do. How do you excel when using these phrases? Well, number one, practice pronunciation. Keep repeating those key phrases until they roll off your tongue naturally. The more comfortable you are, the more confidently you'll speak. Number 2, stay polite but firm. Striking a balance between courtesy and assertiveness is crucial. You can respect others' time and expertise while making your own boundaries clear. Number 3, leverage body language and tone. If you're on a video call or in person, maintain eye contact, keep your tone calm, and show that you're in control of the conversation, without coming across as rigid. And number 4, keep it short and simple, a principle that we hold very close on the podcast. Often, the most effective communication in English is direct yet polite. Overcomplicating your message can lead to misunderstandings. By avoiding these pitfalls and following these tips, you'll find your phrases not only more effective, but also more natural to deliver. Coming up next, we'll tie everything together with a quick conclusion that'll help you absorb these lessons and put them into practice right away. Let's keep going. That brings us to the end of today's episode on communication hacks for time management and productivity. We've covered how to delegate tasks, push back on deadlines, clarify expectations, and politely refuse extra workload, all while sounding professional, confident, and clear. Now, let's take a moment to bring this full circle. Remember Charlie, the overwhelmed professional drowning in deadlines? Imagine him now, equipped with these phrases and strategies. He no longer hesitates when he needs to negotiate a timeline. He confidently assigns tasks without feeling guilty, and when someone drops extra work on his plate, he knows exactly how to handle it without burning himself out. That transformation? It starts with using these skills in your own work life. Before we wrap up, here's a final tip. Start small. You don't need to master all these phrases overnight. Just pick one that resonates with you and use it in your next work interaction. Maybe it's delegating a task. Maybe it's pushing back on a deadline. Whatever it is, the more you practice, the more natural it will feel. And soon, you won't even need to think about it at all. And if you want to reinforce what we covered today, don't forget to sign up for the 3-Minute Minutes, our weekly newsletter packed with powerful business English tips. If you found today's episode helpful, make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. And if you've got a second, I'd love it if you could leave a quick review. It really helps more professionals like you discover the podcast. That's it for now. Thanks for listening to the Business English Podcast. I'm Rob, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep practicing, keep growing, and of course, keep it strictly business.